Over the past few years, I have been thinking about something very important to Disney, with a subject I have little to no real expertise in talking about because I really couldn't get into it, unlike others truly passionate and knowledgeable about music itself. But as a fan, it just doesn't hurt to really speak on something that breathes life into the stories themselves. The portion many people either hate or love depending on how they feel about it. Where yes, this is indeed the broader collection of Disney music, the charm that makes movies larger than life and absolutely unrealistic to normal living standards when characters break out into songs to describe what their hearts truly feel like. Songs that are both good and bad that comes from heroes and villains. And as a child, sometimes I really did feel like it was absurd to watch, even as a fan of Disney, especially when princesses and princes to some degree would go ahead and sing a love song about their lives and the entire town just joining in for some reason. This is not to say I did not have fun with the music when I was younger, like Aladdin and so forth, but how I just generally rolled my eyes the next time I saw a bunch of people gather together to break out into song for some odd reason. But as I grew older, strangely enough, I started to really invest myself into enjoying all the princess songs that I originally didn't like as a child, and understood the direction they were going. That each film that decided to be a musical really took the possibilities that the animated form could tell to a whole different level that worked to such great degrees, because they were able to tell something very important and passionate with a heart that a hero and villain could provide, and allowed people to relate to them within their own struggles. Like, it was not just for the sake of singing songs because they're just fun or kid-friendly, but an actual instrument to describe the world you find yourself in. They make you feel something that real life cannot show without being questioned, becoming the turning point in one's story for better or worse. Of course, in speaking about something like this, it doesn't mean that musicals overall don't work in other forms like live action presents, including the most popular Disney remakes, but for Disney and in their own animation, they speak to a strange, magical, yet also acceptable quality that you can't find anyone else doing to the great degrees that they have done in the past. And this video is meant to really appreciate their importance in both cases that have been good or bad for most films, why they work the way that they do, and even discussing what makes them fall flat for some. And yes, this comes from the fact that other films like Moana 2 came out, and as most people recently discussed, the songs aren't as good as their original counterparts. Not ones that are bad as Wish presented to be mocked relentlessly by, as we will talk about, but not strong as evident by a new team taking over the other old team that made very great songs in the original course of action. Of course, coming from the works of Lin-Manuel Miranda, who did great for Disney, including the likes of Encanto that exploded in popularity similar to the likes of Frozen's own musical success. In that regard, we should also talk a bit why some of them don't actually work in the style they present themselves in, compared to the reason why the Disney Renaissance was so successful that Howard Ashman brought in. An impact that should be greatly discussed for his knowledge and understanding of why musicals go great with animation and the importance it brings to Disney that needs to continue on. Because the truth is, Disney really does need musicals to continue, despite its rough edges of recent musical mishaps compared to its sister studio Pixar that hardly needs or ever even should make a musical on their own. This doesn't mean Disney just itself has to pump out musical after musical as it has proven to work without, but the stories can carry more meaning with having such things. Like, if you look at the ideas of the popular Disney films like Zootopia, Lilo and Stitch, or even their failures like Strange World or even Raya, they also would never work if they were musically inclined. Despite some issues like the boring ones have, they fit fine not being a musical for those specific stories, doubting songs would ever change them as we have seen. However, again, within the hallowed halls of Disney history, the greatest stories are able to tell something through certain feelings, and music is the most important thing of all when it comes to having these. Also in that regard, let's just talk about the musical scores themselves to some degree, because they do highlight the importance of a character's journey with or without songs involved. Stuff that you notice that some Disney films even took to having nothing other than music as the background noise to the movie. And with this knowledge, we go all the way back to Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and see this ingrained into the Disney formula with a princess that has such a compelling high voice that attracts all strangers with a fond interest, whether it be the prince or the audience and the dwarfs themselves, singing about who they are and what they do. A fairy tale magical quality that is brought to life not by animation alone, but by the cheery music that gets you invested in such a story. However you may feel about it, the music brings a whole different attitude that breathes true and almost real life to the world, speaking greatly about the desire of one character compared to had they just complained or talked about it at all. I mean, it's still relatively short compared to the modern age of musicals with the amount of songs they had, but they still had their impact regardless to making it an explosive success never before seen at the time, giving us what we know today because of its very inclusion. Same thing can be said in a way for Pinocchio that gave it a fun twist with the rights and wrongs of the world depending on the character, disguising itself as a clever way that seems good for him to do and actually not including their song that everyone in the entire world knows as the theme song of Disney itself, When You Wish Upon a Star, starting and ending the movie on the hopes of what the studio meant, the belief in dreams and desires that anyone could strive for despite their own situations and struggles that impact a destiny. And truly without it, nothing we see today could ever exist to the heights it was given under that same belief of wishing upon stars, that any musical Disney would ever think about doing would exist to its high standard. And for the sake of this video, let's actually throw in Fantasia into the mix. This is a film that is not about any musical songs other than featuring classical music in the background of glorious visuals. A landmark piece of animation that could be regarded as one of the best ever made for simply using simple concepts like music and animation. That Fantasia represents something timeless that animation and music could provide no matter how old the tape may stand to be or the ideas may be themselves. Sure, it may not be like the rest of films we are talking about that has songs and the overall statement we mentioned about the current movies, but it really does show the importance of music in these films, either animated or live action. There are no real great sound effects, no lyrics, no talking of any kind in each segment except for Deems Taylor, but just an orchestra being conducted to play classics written over hundreds of years with a visual piece that displays it. It shows how music is very crucial in driving a story even if it isn't a musical, and how Disney pioneered that aspect in films that are both musical and non-musical types. The characters dance to the beat and you feel something that resonates with you that makes sense to what you're seeing. The story is made by the music itself and cannot exist without it. So in both regards of the original and the sequel Fantasia 2000, these films demonstrate the need for music to even exist. I mean, most other fairy tales after this film would actually show it, even if they weren't musicals themselves, like Peter Pan Taking Flight with the chorus in the background singing and entertaining. Same thing could be said for The Passion of Cinderella, speaking about her own dreams being wishes the heart makes and falling in love once upon a dream with Aurora. The feelings of love or the aspirations these own characters have comes from these very songs that sets off their journey. Sure, it may be short and they do have other scenes that explain otherwise, but without it, you lack that clear information that drives them to the point of their own happy ending. But the defining piece of why these songs did work comes years after Walt Disney himself with someone like Howard Ashman. His impact truly made Disney movies to what most people know in pop culture society, with the musical theater combined into an animated film. This is where we talk about why characters and stories need to be like this to get a point through when it's absolutely necessary for the story to exist, and the eventual failures with some others over time. What Howard brought was actually relatively simple, yet more effective than what had been, what others said by having him tell stories through song. The music communicates the central idea to the plot, as he said here.
Music, for me anyway, is information. It's a way to get character and plot information across. So you want music to be information. You want it to develop story or character in some way, so the song will carry its own weight and justify its existence in the film. This is a classic kind of song. The Disney version of saying the beginning of every film of the classic fairy tales. There's a version of this song. Every show, the leading lady has a chance to plunk herself down on a tree trunk somewhere and to sing about what she dreams about. And she sings, "This is what I want." It's called the Girls I Want song. I was interested, just for myself, in trying to give more specific information and yet keep it feeling like a ballad. It's her dream. You're not going to miss what the film's about. That's the central issue of the entire film, and by having her sing it, it makes that point indelible. She wishes she were human. At the end, she will become human and live happily ever after. That's what she wants.
It's neat because animation is almost a place that you can use a whole other set of skills and way of working.
The interesting thing about what he talks about is how the animators who worked with him explained that they never heard something like an I Want song before. How he explained that you must include a song that describes what a character simply wants. The birth of Disney doing the now famous I Want songs that everyone knows about, like Part of Your World did, which actually was something Disney already had in a way that has been there since the beginning, even before the animators finally knew what he was telling them with Snow White's short Someday My Prince Will Come, or even I'm Wishing songs that describes what she wanted in her life. but with what he did in The Little Mermaid, did something very different and very effective to create the story to what it is, describing how a character sounds and sings and how each songs actually drive the plot forward within a few minutes. Again, seeing in Part of Your World that is that benchmark that drove Disney forward to what it is today with music, in that oh so perfect fairy tale of unrealistic singing proportions. But unlike that statement I just said, as we grow older, we come to understand how that actually works effectively with someone who can understand a difference between singing and telling a story. Of course, in the past you've already seen me show this scene 1,000 times, but it remains so relevant today as it was when they made The Little Mermaid, comparing the future failures of live action films or even recent ones like Wish even attempted to do. The whole direction of Part of Your World describes not just Ariel, but the identity of the movie, going into the journey of whatever it would take to be a part of something greater than your current life. Hence why the breaths are so important with the singing that goes into talking or whispering that makes us understand the attitude of the character. Sure, it's simple to understand by basic acting standards of what they want if they just spoke it, but this song really takes it on a whole other level that makes you care. You're hypnotized by the song itself and you feel exactly what Ariel is feeling that almost is impossible in coming true. Because it's not just a song, it's a character's story because of how she can transition in intensity, hence why the modern version is just a glorified music video where she sings for the sake of singing. But besides that, it provides the film with a way forward within the first act towards the last. Every song is actually influenced by this very song, and the music before was created just for that. You think of songs like Under the Sea, Poor Unfortunate Souls, and Kiss the Girl, and you see the influence that carries over. Like when Sebastian has to come up with a reason or idea to keep her down here with a song that is very crucial to the identity of where she lives and why it's great compared to her own desire of the service. And then Ursula's villain song also creates this personal want and have that a villain already owns to their advantage, leading them to a partial dream come true that guides what happens between the two characters.
There's foreshadowing there when she says, what would I give if I could live out of these waters? What would I pay? The fact is she's going to make a deal with the devil. We can see that she's going to give up her voice. She's going to give up a lot. She's eventually going to give up practically her life.
The conflict the story needs to continue before it finally gets settled based upon the wants of others. And Kiss the Girl is the last of these songs used to see if she can keep what she dreamed about, or the other forces like Ursula can stop that for their own gain. People working together to ensure it's fulfilled and so that the villain doesn't win. Within the last act being the final fight before the end circles back to Part of Your World now being successful, with the ending that affirms what she dreamed about came true and we are all connected to each other, and that's great. And that's why it became successful the way it was, because each song understood the important moments of the film, threading all the actions in the in-between. Because honestly, without these songs, the film would feel more guideless if you just replaced them with talking about what they wanted or needed to do.
Howard said if you can take a song and you can remove it from the script and the script still makes sense, you haven't done your job properly. In this, he gets to discuss his theory of why these songs were where they were, how they advanced the story, how they contributed, how they aligned to the grander traditions of musical theater.
And that's why most of the other Renaissance films were successful. Thinking about how Howard also started to work on Aladdin and did Beauty and the Beast. Beauty and the Beast on this side being regarded as one of the best animated works, which also can be simply attested to the musical nature of the film, where it's been played to great success in theaters just like The Lion King would do eventually, like on the Broadway shows or other musical stage productions that you'll probably see in a Disney park. My belief of why this works is because you get to know a bunch of people both inside and out. Like on the side of this small French town and the inhabitants of the Beast's castle, you get to know the people in the town, big or small, hero or villain, and how that plays within the entire concept of having beauty match with a beast, discovering where monsters or men are made of despite their initial exterior emotions. This includes the points of where they're just simply even talking in the songs, the breaks in between songs like Belle when she travels throughout and sings again when the town expresses how they feel about her and how Gaston feels about himself, or even songs like the title song show having two people connect with their own differences, how love overcomes things of all hardships no matter who you are. And one can say the same for Aladdin and what they did for friendship, and love technically still, where we open our hearts to the abilities and ideas others can bring, and their talents that can be as numerous as the stars like Genie. Friend Like Me being very important to describe the genie's powers being reliable and how big it appeared to to affect others like in Prince Ali, and then having a whole new world that changes the perspective of life and Disney itself, from its limits to the endless possibilities that others cannot tell you to see. Of course, paralleling both Jasmine and Aladdin from the way they lived and how they want to live to get things they desire in different ways. And that's something only a song can show, both in a whole new world soaring above the night sky through various landmarks across the world, where you can feel free no matter what you desire or you seek. That there is a moment in life to explore beyond what is possible, like a street rat using a disguise from a genie that can show a princess who is trapped in a favored society. I mean, I can use a whole bunch of words, but you get the entire picture of why sequences like this represents the best to this very day. Not for the entire world viewing sequences that she goes on, but how bonds between two can be very important on any side or any level, including genies and street rats that can help each other out. Like, how can you feel anything if it weren't for them singing this entire song? Are they just gonna fly off in the sky and just see landmarks? That would be very boring. Lion King is also a great example of how big the importance of musical songs are when it pertains to life itself, the circle of it, and the overall view of the animal kingdom. The structure that people must face within their own families and living up to their own mistakes. Learning what Simba thinks and wants as a king to have arrogant fun, and then learning of that consequence with another like his own Uncle Scar to usurp his own brother's power by caring about the people he doesn't actually care about. Or Hakuna Matata having others raise you and not dwell on your past regrets or failures, and coming to terms with falling in love with Nala, using the rest of Hans Zimmer's score to take us through Simba's rightful place that honors the legacy his family holds in the circle of life, moving for a better future. And even in the most boring moments like films like Pocahontas present, the music still saves it and presents a golden opportunity to talk about things about the world. Not songs like Mine where it's just about gold, that's totally boring, but Colors of the Wind that represents what is beautiful and true to the strength of Pocahontas, the world that surrounds us and that we must respect, delivering great meaning to the land others will inhabit and where societies should lead themselves, but not enough to discuss like others do to serve the interest of all characters that need to interact, just like the last great example of a musical in The Hunchback of Notre Dame. And I think this is the most powerful, not just for being my favorite Disney movie of this era, but in shaping both hero and villain far more above the others. The dark nature of this story allows us to dive deeper into the passionate thoughts of Frollo and Quasimodo, the guilt they share on their own beliefs and the wants they desire to be free from it, centering around the interactions of the girl Esmeralda. You get something that's very descriptive that a non-musical version could never do when you go back and forth between them, in their past and their present and their future, with simply wanting to live their life like everyone does out there and keeping in him for his own use and justification of purging wickedness as he may seem. More of a use for his own personal taste is shielded by serving a higher power without appearing to succumb to sin as he literally does. Which is why Hellfire is the best Disney villain song, no question, because you get to see a villain struggle with his own true desires and blaming others for it. Like, it describes what he does and who he is that is different, since all the others simply scoff or laugh in the face of their heroes to manipulate them, compared to pushing the blame and running away from your own problems that your own faith even wants you to repent against, with the same juxtaposition to the hero Quasimodo singing songs like Heaven's Light to have someone who can truly love him and save him for who he is, not a monster but a human, yet how they both don't get her anyways because they don't simply see her as that fellow human, knowing what they are thinking of but being too late into stopping it. The music is the turning point against a character to commit the deeds that they will do, a midpoint between sane and insane actions that contribute to the movie's overall message as we come to understand it. The songs are a passionate response of what they will come to be, and whether we choose to accept it or do we reject it. Do we love or do we hate? Do we actually sympathize with their feelings, or do we fear what they will become? Where honestly, in speaking about that, it does have its bad moments when they use music when they don't need to, working even better had they removed A Guy Like You, leaving the reprise of Bells of Notre Dame as the final song where the lesson had been learned from the story like Clopin told us about in the beginning. I mean, let's mention a little bit about A Guy Like You to some other extensive degree. In an entire musical that talks about contrasting between right or wrong, monster or man, they have songs like this to calm the audience in the most perilous moments, even while Paris is burning right outside. In this small case, you can see why music does not actually work all the time. Of course, it's very necessary to explore the feelings of the characters in all the songs of Hunchback, but when you go into something like this that is meant to cheer people up, it doesn't work because it takes takes away from the message that is literally happening besides them and affirms at the very end. It just doesn't need to appear like that because that's not the main focus. And the main focus should be on the story, which all the other songs were able to tell because they are able to tell their feelings, and the actions that surround them actually confirms it to them. And songs like this doesn't do anything, but instead serves as a stupid ass pointless break that is meant to calm your fears.
For a film, some of the music is still justified. Even I find, and this is maybe just instincts for myself, I still find that even though I'm interested in narrative songs, you only want to push it so far. You only want to push your luck so far. It may be taste or whatever it is. I'm not really terribly interested in the animated characters starting to look at each other and go, hey, let's go down and buy some soda. So there's narrative information getting across, but in a different way, and in a kind of song that's constructed differently.
Now, the reason why I brought up this scene without any notice is because it pertains well to a guy like you, of how Howard, when he was talking about The Little Mermaid, was not interested in telling characters who want to go buy soda, just like how we're not interested in how Quasimodo feels about Esmeralda in a certain moment of the film that feels like its narrative must actually calm down before going back to the real plot at hand. Hence why it just doesn't fit, and why we need to tell something that fits the story. You don't want to push it too far. But overall, with the story of Hunchback, it's about accepting who is a monster and who is a man, and the only way you could have learned that is through songs that proclaimed what a character felt, giving you reason to fear or love them since they were able to explain themselves in an oddly enough logical way. Of course, after this, the musicals themselves started to shrink in size, but still had crucial moments like when Hercules Goes the Distance that emphasized the importance of a hero's journey, or Mulan's reflection torn between family and what she wants to be to protect it before she goes on her own journey. But how it all came to an end after Phil Collins mainly sung everything in Tarzan, and all the other movies focused more on the adventure, yet still having one major song to sell it on. This then directs us to the popular era, as I would like to say, that started in the revival animation, including films like Tangled, Frozen, and Moana's taking hold after Princess and the Frog that gave the musical flair back to Disney in the 2000s that went without it. The charm that carried the movie throughout that led Disney back to its roots with a more modern flair or spice that made it match the attitude of its time. In films like Tangled, you brought back Alan Menken to the fold of 3D animation with these songs that were made fit for a more bubbly character. In the midst of locking a beautiful girl up with magical hair, we discover a world of passionate, curious dreams were something that they could never see, including ones that hardly even involve themselves in seeing them fitting a mold like Flynn Rider. I See the Light is a great representation and example of why musicals should continue to exist, because we see something more than what was, opening who we truly are that can rather see for the better beyond such basic or simple goals. Through this example, we lift the fog of life's great barrier both physically and emotionally, and we get to see more of life even while we are already out there. It's genius in its blending between classical Disney styles that we knew up to this point for the more pop attitude behind it, a combination that matches completely with Rapunzel's free-flowing hair that started in When Will My Life Begin. That Tangled became a great example of how different films can be and become to separate from each other rather than being the same old typical fairy tale story that you probably would have known at that point, where these Disney movies can develop its own personality from the use of separate musical genres and expanding it from its traditional roots that they started with the folk rock or whatever they thought what was good enough, as said by Alan Menken, that makes it work with the identity of the film.
In every case, you're trying to figure out how is the music commenting and adding to the story. Well, here it was a matter of, for me, of looking for a fresh palette, and the fresh palette came from Rapunzel being in this tower and her long hair and saying, you know what, she wants freedom. And freedom was so much a part of the 60s and so much a part of folk rock, and I felt just innately on a gut level, I felt that energy. And I did think about Joni Mitchell, the earliest Joni Mitchell, thought about like Chelsea Morning and that kind of pent-up energy.
Where without it, it could have felt very generic and unmemorable, but because it actually had that style, Tangled became very popular and acceptable that fast, which contributed to future films like Frozen being the big success it was, for better or worse again, to no matter which way you think about it. It leaned more into that modern style with the classic Hans Christian Andersen tale focusing on the emotional distinctions of Elsa and Anna as sisters, wanting to be a part of something or away from everything, and Let It Go became the hallmark of this entire work, repeating itself to be more comfortable to how you actually feel specifically, but also having love being an open door to dumb villains with stupid plans and young princesses with a need of connection, and finally combining both with traits and songs into one that allowed them to reconnect with the initial message of just simply wanting to build a snowman, but never understanding what they needed to do so until later. It may not be the best that they can offer since it became so damn annoying and overplayed, but it was very effective regardless into making the film the most successful at the time for animation and beyond, absolutely proving the power that music had when you started to hear songs like Let It Go appear on the radio, the similarities we would see later on when Encanto would have that same star power. And talking about that brings us to the recent highs when Lin-Manuel Miranda worked with Disney on Moana and Encanto, bringing a new charm with new songs that made animation explode with such vibrant action.
The music of Disney, it's gotta match the incredible visuals. You go to these heightened places, you go to other worlds, and that's what we look to Disney for. Whether it's When You Wish Upon a Star, which is so iconic now, it's almost hard to imagine it being written. It's just something that's always existed in our minds.
How Far I'll Go is one of the great examples of this, with the hero trying to do right for her destiny, torn between her people and love and self-doubt that constantly is fought between the highs of Maui running away from his own problems, speaking his own praises that were also there to help humanity out. Most of Moana speaks to the ability of songs being able to pick us up no matter who we are or what we face, with our talents being able to shine in any difficult obstacle, including ones that involve the vast seas that divides the lands apart. The journey of our ancestors to the point that we can go further if we accept who we actually are, belting out the proud nature of our own blood and our own beliefs that she could have only done if their songs were involved in telling us so.
We're not just writing any old songs, we're representing this beautiful culture with its own rich musical heritage. I want you to hear Moana and feel like you are on the sea, on these islands, in this totally different part of the world, and yet feel at home.
Music in this sense of Moana speaks to us culturally within our own past and our own future, and that is what the journey teaches us, while also having some fun with Lin's own style that showed in songs like Shiny, which in terms of speaking to that style brought to Disney is a similar truth to why Encanto also worked out well because of the songs that showcase Mirabel's family, mostly on their struggles with themselves and each other.
So one of the things that makes this musical different from other Disney musicals is that it's this great crossroads of musical styles, and there's all of this opportunity for us to use those styles to talk about different people in the family and talk about their emotions and keep them all distinct.
Just like Frozen, the music again topped the charts as the most memorable things from this movie when we actually do talk about Bruno as the hit song that took the airwaves. Like, you remember the movie for having such a compelling soundtrack that matches its familial message. It's a passionate display of why she can help or why they need that help that picks up the already broken pieces of the family that needs to be seen. Pressures that build and build before seeing the breaking point and mending the mistakes of the past that allowed them to be better. Perfectly representing the culmination of Disney magic when it's held in the sacred bond that a family has. Musically just adding the bonus of the problems and their evident solutions.
Well, I think with every musical project I embark on, I'm trying to find the pulse of the characters first and foremost. What is Mirabel's pulse? How is that different from Abuela's pulse? How is that different from Bruno's pulse? How is that different from Pepa's pulse? And the fun challenge of this with Encanto is that we've got a lot of family members. There are songs that are solo journeys. You know, when you hear from Mirabel's sister Luisa, it's a very contemporary Colombian reggaeton sound because she's got this very cool, very tough exterior. And then I wanted to sort of peel away and deconstruct that over the course of the song. And then you have Isabela, who sounds like 90s rock en español. And then in the last song, I'm smashing those themes together. That's the fun of building a musical score, is when you find all those pulses and then you start to have them sing in duets and trios, really interesting combinations and stuff start to pop up.
Encanto is just a greater example of a film that needs music definitely in order to sell the point of where the underlying issues are in a family that is idolized to perfection, except the main character who doesn't hold any magical gift, but loves them to help them fix them out, having them as a key throughout songs that tell them of their own personal relationship between her own sisters up to her own abuela. Just like we began with Part of Your World as the key theme to the film, the family magical focuses on, well, the family magical as the main subject when you get those same musical motifs in the finale with All of You that ties it together perfectly in the lesson that they all learn.
I think also having the music relate to what is happening on screen. It's not just a song that lives on its own, it is also telling a story with our characters.
And it's just been really remarkable to see how much storytelling we can do with music, because we wanted to get as much music into the story as possible, and every time we add another song, it just takes the movie to a whole new level.
The music transcends everything else because that's where the story comes from. It is told through these passionate moments, wanting a miracle to save them or to realize who they truly are and what else they could do. The movies flourish because the story flows from the songs that give it such a great identity, leading you from one scene to the next, and they flow because they match what needs to be done. Because like everything I've been questioning about, had these songs been removed, would you actually watch Encanto had it not had these songs in the first place? Would any of these moments feel impactful if it weren't for these very songs? Because the real answer anyone would say is simply no. It would feel so dull and you wouldn't feel a point to even watching this family drama unfold. Where finally, this leads us to the great problem with the other songs and music that don't quite work out as we've seen before. And I know you're gonna say or expect that it's gonna be about Wish again, isn't it? Because it's the one everyone literally mocked for its songs not being like Disney was, mostly up to this point. Because honestly, what else is there to say that everyone has already covered ground on? Like it was literally roasted from top to bottom of the I Want or the Villain song that doesn't even work because it just sucks. Again, on their own, they're simply not bad songs, but they're horrible songs in the context of what we've learned up to this point of every Disney musical that has ever existed. That compared to everything else, the songs never actually told the story, or even attempted to even connect the movie to it. Ones that involve songs that hardly learn anything about the hero or the villain, and lyrically or tonally doesn't even make sense. Wish was a film that needed music from the start, but it needed the right kind. The ones that both past and present taught us that contributed to the next scene, but having none of the story to carry it through both inside and out, with this wish hardly describing what she is fighting for or another character to become a certain way. Like I've already said, I have respect for Julia Michaels working on this. She is talented enough, but not to the point where they just put story and songs together. The whole point of this video was to show how songs or music in general is supposed to tell the story more than had the story play out without having such songs exist as the advantage Disney has already had. With one review listed that perfectly describes the movie's soundtrack seeming to have been conceived or written not to advance the story or provide beauty, but to fill an industrial need. Just basically stating that they put a bunch of songs in a movie and called it a day because it was an anniversary film. Very hollow and bland and doesn't string along quite well because you don't learn anything specifically about the journey. Sure, you can get things visually that precedes or succeeds such events in the film, but lyrically, as I've already discussed for songs like This Wish, it tells you nothing about the story, with vague words that can apply to anything you could think of or if you didn't even see the movie, which again, not everyone even did anyway. But if you dare attempt to think about if Wish would have worked without music, you are also dead wrong because like the lyrics itself, it would become too generic than it already is, needing music to tell a very important story about wishes, not just about having them, but the reasons why people even care to believe in them that served as that great tribute. But for the sake of all of this, I really will just end talking about it right here because I'm just done with this. Okay, maybe not with it totally with what I have planned specifically to talk about in videos, but you get the point that has already been made about its music that everyone butchered into oblivion. The music needs to have a purpose within its story, selling itself to the audience of what the theme is and why we should support it that balances all out. And how this leads us back to the current day to the conversation of Moana 2's music coming off the legacy of the original's great success. They clearly aren't as bad as Wish, far from it, where they do work to the degrees that most audiences can enjoy, but the true consensus regarding it is of one that is a lesser degree to Lin's original soundtrack considering the new composers brought on for what was clearly a Disney Plus series. Like its tune doesn't match quite up because it's brought a weird rhythm that isn't quite the caliber of a theatrical movie would bring, and just more evident that their songs worked for a series. It clearly tries to capture the attitude of the original with evident knockoff songs or songs that are just fun, but don't do much in contributing to a character's final journey. Everything, the songs and the movie itself, just feels too fast for some kind of out of place for not having enough time that the series would have been better fleshed out towards songs like Get Lost because they felt more paced with the character you hardly interact with anyway. Every song in a story regardless still needs to fit the message of going from point A to B. Sure, it's better than Wish when it actually matches what is being told in the story, but it has little impact for other characters in some other moments because they have too much of it. Again, going back to the importance of the music is that they were able to tie into each role a person had in the film, where a character's journey would head and why they were even there to exist. In films like these, they don't carry enough weight because some characters don't do too much in the overall plot. That songs have to be done when it feels necessary to do, as long as you're capable of designing a feature that is supposed to feel like a feature. Which this one clearly doesn't, and ties us back into songs like A Guy Like You and why that did not fit. Stories and songs are supposed to fit within the message, and if you don't do that, that's why the soundtrack fails. But regardless of all of this, we finally end the bad things with a concept of why we are able to accept a Disney musical existing or not without each song plays in the role of music in the background that makes each moment feel special. That we learned here is that songs of Disney are the stories of Disney, with the other scenes playing a part in how that story's message ends to confirm its validity. That they create a theme that only animation could provide that comes across as realistic and transform it into a real tangible idea that reality can also strive for. It's how we are able to connect with ourselves with our own beliefs and feelings of where life can truly head for the better and steer far away from its worst. Telling us something that's very important without taking away from our own enjoyment of a movie just to simply enjoy and then actually learn from. It creates moments of affirmation that one is on the right path both before and after and makes sense to why we do it. It is able to present crucial information without being a drag to even learn from it. They truly serve as a launching point or continuation of events that explain why a certain movie exists or is the way that they are. Without it, or its necessary attributes, you learn nothing and become nothing because there's hardly any reason to follow it into the unknown. But when you do, you begin to believe what you are seeing is true and accept it for what it is. Sure, there might be dozens of stories that don't even need it, and that's fine, but for the existence of why we love Disney, why we actually connect to a certain character or our emotional feelings that resonate with its own ideas, even the simple songs that were created to exist alongside the movie without characters singing themselves, they just are very important and are much needed that allows the imagination to run free with its own beliefs. That when we wish upon a star, our dreams will come true and finally become a part of our world. And I'm all done. Goodbye.
There's just something about the Disney fairy tale cartoons going all the way back to Snow White and then to Pinocchio. I mean, I grew up on Pinocchio and Peter Pan, and the idea of doing one of those is like there's all these library books on the shelf. There's Snow White and there's Sleeping Beauty and there's Cinderella, there's Peter Pan, there's Pinocchio. And to try to make something that fits comfortably on the shelf with those, I mean, that's like, what a difficult thing to do, but what a great thing to try to do. The last great place to do Broadway musicals is in animation. It's a whole other world.